Well everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the PSP Street, aka the PSP E1000, and see how this particular gaming console holds up in 2024. Now, the thing I would definitely tell you about the PSP Street was that this was a very interesting console that came out, many years ago, and probably for the average person, I probably wouldn't recommend buying it anymore. Even if you're going to go through and buy a PlayStation P, this type of console, it just doesn't make much sense to go and purchase, because these particular devices really kind of skimped out on a lot of things that the newer type of devices actually ended up bringing. So I will tell you on the exterior and just kind of throughout this console, there's a lot of things that still make this a PSP. You can still play PlayStation P games on it, and for the most part, this was kind of one of the last PlayStation Ps that kind of came out. But because of that, there's so many other PSPs that you could basically buy. So what is the point of even purchasing this one when you can go through and purchase some other ones and probably get an even better console without even spending that much more money? So I will tell you, that's kind of the big thing to kind of keep in mind with this particular console. It did come out about 13 years ago. So back in 2011, this was one of those consoles that basically had came out back then. And like I said, this was a very old console. It was it wasn't an old console at that time that just came out, but this was a weird decision from, Sony to kind of make. They wanted to make this kind of like super cheap budget type of console, but it was just very, very weird. So for one, the PSP on the outside, this PSP Street model, it was built out of like this different type of texture, which felt different than the original PSPs. It was very interesting. I don't really know what they were trying to do here, but basically one of the big things here was that they had actually removed some of the buttons on the front of this particular PSP. So they had to remove the brightness buttons on the front of this particular console. So in order to actually basically change the brightness at all, you had to go inside of the system settings every single time. So that was something that was actually very, very interesting here. Also, the PlayStation button was now touch only, but the volume button and the select start buttons basically remained the same. And if you can't tell, I'm actually reading this from the fandom page within PlayStation. So that again in and of itself was a very interesting thing that kind of ended up happening there. And once again, this was just one of those decisions that Sony basically made. The display itself was still okay, like it was still good enough for the most part. If you had to kind of just go through and just use it, you could probably be okay. But there was also no Wi-Fi inside of this particular console. So that was something that was super crazy. I still, don't understand why Sony did this. I feel like if they really focused in on Wi-Fi, multiplayer gaming, and online multiplayer gaming, they could have had a hit on their hands even with the PlayStation P. Now, although they were trying to sell more PS Vita consoles because this did, kind of get announced at the same time as the PlayStation Vita, I still feel like there was a huge marketplace and a huge, amount of people who wanted to use something like, let's just say a PlayStation P still with all those PlayStation P games. And this thing I would definitely tell you made a lot of sense to buy. I think Sony just did a really weird thing from that particular side. So that in and of itself, once again, was just another slight small thing to kind of keep in mind there too. Another thing to keep in mind here too was the speaker grill really wasn't that great. It was a mono speaker. The build quality really wasn't that great, and it did have a smaller battery from what we saw compared to the PlayStation Street as well. So just from the research that I've seen from these things kind of being out for so long, that was something that was a very interesting thing to kind of keep in mind with this particular console as well. And if I'm going to go through once again and pick up a console, this was one of those things that kind of, stood out to me at that time. So I will definitely tell you from that particular side as well, when I look back at the PSP Street, from the exterior and from the features that it kind of skimped out on, it was just a very strange decision. The reason I say that too is because right now, this console is significantly older, but so are the PSP 2000 and 3000. You might as well just go ahead and buy a PSP 2000 or a PSP 3000 in this particular case, rather than going through and buying something like a, PlayStation, P Street model. Like I said, I think the PSP Street model was good. It was kind of okay when it first came out, but for these many years that it's been out, it just doesn't make any sense to go and purchase. And like I said, I think you're much better off purchasing another console that might still be relevant in some ways, like a PSP 1000 or 2000, rather than buying the PSP Street. So keep that in mind, but that's kind of how I feel about the PSP Street, in this day and age. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.